Picture an aircraft carrier like a casino table. Japan pushes its chips forward, betting everything on one opening punch. This story starts with a fuel gauge near empty, and a driver convinced the next gas station can be taken by force. The Pacific War wasn't one mistake. It was a combo. Bad intel, bad logistics, and a myth of one big win. We'll stay in the decision room, not the battlefield, because wars begin when options quietly disappear on paper. And at the end, we'll pull a modern checklist: how to stop ourselves from ever going all in by accident. Japan's industrial engine ran on imports, oil, steel, scrap. So resources didn't feel economic, it felt existential. World War I taught a brutal lesson. Long wars are won by mobilization and supply, not bravery speeches. Then came China, an expensive, endless drain, where every mile forward created new costs, new enemies, and no clean exit. When Japan moved into French Indochina, it wasn't just geography. It poked the sanction hornet's nest. Summer 1941. U.S. financial controls and licensing slammed the brakes, making oil feel like a ticking clock. If most of your fuel comes from one supplier, a cutoff doesn't just hurt. You start panicking. Inside Japan, sanctions weren't framed as policy. They were framed as strangulation, a knife at the throat. Meanwhile, the 1930s trade world was fragmenting into blocks, so buying resources felt harder than taking them. The southern resources area looked like a cheat code: rubber, oil, tin. Just capture it and problems vanish. But Southeast Asia had locks. Singapore, Malacca, sea lanes, meaning resources came with new wars attached. Here's the trap. Leaders shrink choices into two boxes: humiliating withdrawal or heroic seizure, no middle path. China made withdrawal politically radioactive, so the peace option kept getting smaller in every meeting. Negotiations stopped being solutions and become time buying, like arguing over price while your tank hits empty. And when time pressure rises, risk-taking feels rational, even if it's actually desperation wearing a suit. Modern lesson preview. Sanctions can raise war risk by creating deadlines unless you design safe off-ramps. Now the domestic engine. Japan's politics shifted from noisy debate toward mobilization, where dissent became dangerous. When debate dies, leaders hear fewer no answers, so bad plans sound smoother and more inevitable. Then the classic bureaucratic problem. Army and Navy didn't just fight enemies, they fought for budgets and influence. Strategy becomes sales. The Navy markets go south as the answer because big fleets require big funding. The Army, stuck in China, feared retreat would crack its authority, so compromise looked like surrender. Two services, two maps, two wars. Without one shared definition of victory, every plan becomes a tug of war. In systems like this, risk spreads out. No single person owns the catastrophe, so pushing forward feels easier. And in a tense climate, backing down can be politically lethal. So leaders learn to never look soft. Propaganda tightens the frame. Sanctions become encirclement, and compromise becomes betrayal, even before the first shot. The co-prosperity sphere wraps conquest in moral language. Liberation. Order. Asia for Asians. Once war is framed as destiny, not policy, numbers lose power and myths start driving steering wheels. That's how all-in becomes identity. Retreat isn't a choice anymore. It's a stain you can't wash. Modern lesson preview. Incentives shape strategy, so fixing institutions can matter more than buying new weapons. If you want peace, you must protect internal disagreement because silence is how bad decisions grow legs. And when leaders fear humiliation more than failure, they often choose the loud option, the one that feels brave. By 1941, meetings start acting like conveyor belts. Each step procedural, yet each step reduces flexibility. September 6, 1941. Japan decides to negotiate while preparing for war, two tracks running toward the same cliff. Diplomacy becomes theater. Smiling handshakes up front, silent ship movements in the background, like a bad magic trick. When the other side senses mobilization, trust collapses, and even workable compromises start looking like traps. Civilian leaders try for summits and deals, but the military timetable keeps swallowing their room to maneuver. The biggest red line is China. If withdrawal is taboo, then peace requires an impossible political miracle. And the real clock isn't in the palace, it's in the fuel tanks, dropping day by day. Cabinet politics hardens, hawks rise, moderates fall, and every personnel change signals a narrower future. October 1941, leadership shifts. The new cabinet carries less patience for compromise, more confidence in force. War guidance documents quietly lock the plan. Once routes are drawn, people start treating them as destiny. Look at the geography. Southeast Asia isn't next door. It's an ocean-spanning project with fragile lifelines. Yet Europe's chaos creates false confidence. Britain is distracted. France is down. The window is open. That ignores alliances. Pressure on one empire can trigger responses from a network, not a single isolated target. Negotiation offers shrink into symbols, a plan, B plan, because politics demands no retreat, not workable nuance. Then comes the deadline logic. If no deal by late November, we move. Deadlines become self-fulfilling prophecy. Early November. The direction is reaffirmed. Prepare to strike in early December, so uncertainty is replaced by momentum. Once ships are moving, reversal costs explode, operationally, politically, psychologically, so leaders stop imagining return. Here's the missing piece. No off-ramps were designed, so every road led to the same cliff edge. Modern lesson preview. Artificial deadlines warp reality, so crisis managers must design time, not just spend it. With options burned and time shrinking, war stops being a choice and starts feeling like the only button left. Now the myth, decisive battle doctrine? One huge win that ends everything, sounds clean, like a Hollywood final boss. Past victories feed this. We won before with nerve, so leaders start believing nerve can replace math. But America isn't just ships. It's politics, industry, and pride. And those don't surrender after one punch. Underestimating mobilization is fatal. Production curves can turn a surprise attack into a long-term disadvantage. The oil fantasy was simple. Capture fields, ship it home, problem solved, ignoring refining, transport, and protection. Military confidence peaks can be dangerous. Elite pilots and new planes feel like permanent advantage, but they're perishable. Pearl Harbor is an opening move, not checkmate. If your plan needs the enemy to quit, it's not a plan. The key assumption was psychological. Shock leads to negotiation. That's a feelings forecast, not intelligence. And the intel culture leaned optimistic. Bad news got softened, delayed, or ignored because it ruined the mood. If you lack deep insight into the opponent, you start projecting your own logic onto them like a mirror. Dissent warnings get punished socially. Nobody wants to be the guy who says the emperor has no clothes. Worse, Army and Navy wanted different endgames. One imagined a fleet showdown, the other needed territorial control. Logistics should have been a pre-war question. Distance, shipping capacity, escort doctrine. These are war's bones. Oil is carried by tankers, not flags. If tankers are few, every submarine becomes a strategic threat. Sea lanes are long, choke points are narrow, and the enemy chooses where to cut you like scissors on a rope. Yet the propaganda frame screamed encirclement, so any compromise felt like cowardice, not strategy. This is how biases stack. Sunk cost, honor, deadlines, optimism. Each one alone is manageable. Together, they're explosive. So the perfect combo forms. Leaders trust the myth, ignore the math, and treat logistics as tomorrow's problem. Modern echo. Today's all-ins can be cyber, missiles, or blockades. Same psychology, different costumes. And once you go all in, you lose control of the table. The opponent's response defines the real game. If your victory condition depends on enemy restraint, you're not strategizing. You're daydreaming with a uniform on. A serious plan tests 3 questions. Enemy will, your supply, and alliance reactions. Japan undertested all 3. The fatal comfort was simplicity. One big battle, one big shock, one big deal. History rarely works that clean. Still, the calendar kept moving, and every day made retreat look harder, because retreat would expose the bluff. By late November, the decision wasn't brave. It was automated by the system Japan had built around itself. November 26, 1941. The Hull note lands demanding major withdrawals. Tokyo reads it as humiliation, not bargaining. Once a proposal becomes national shame, negotiation dies because leaders fear losing face more than losing wars. Meanwhile, the fleet is already committed at sea, turning politics into a passenger riding the military timetable. Final approvals are often short and quiet. One meeting, one nod, because the real decision happened weeks earlier. At this point, there's no realistic exit left, only momentum, pride, and the fear of looking weak. The checklist that should have been asked, industry, logistics, enemy will, alliances, was skipped in the rush. Operational silence also silences debate. Once secrecy rules, policy arguments become treason adjacent by vibe, and the thumbnail image returns. Carrier deck, horizon tilted. Chips are already in, and the dealer isn't Japan. We won't replay every battle today, just remember. Once the war starts, the system tests your weak assumptions first. So let's pivot. The real value is learning how to keep a crisis from turning into an all-in war. Lesson 1. Reduce resource panic. Diversify supply. Stockpile smartly and build substitutes before your clock starts. Lesson 2. Align incentives. If agencies gain status from escalation, escalation becomes the default recommendation. Lesson 3. Never set deadlines without exits. Design off-ramps that preserve face for both sides. Lesson 4. Red team enemy will. Test the assumption they'll negotiate like it's a bug, not a hope. Lesson 5. Separate propaganda from analysis. Mobilization slogans can't be allowed to rewrite your risk assessment. Lesson 6. Integrate intel and logistics before go. Wars are won by moving things, not by promising things. Lesson 7. Model second-order effects. Alliances tighten, industries pivot, and asymmetric counters appear fast. Toolkit. Run war games and scenario planning regularly so your team learns to doubt its favorite story. Define accountability. Who can hit the brakes? If nobody owns the stop button, momentum will. Final rule. When someone sells you one big win, don't clap. Ask for the math, the supply, and the exit.